Hello and welcome to another video here at Pragmatic Works. My name is Mitchell Pearson, and in this video we're going to take a look at window functions, specifically how to do a lag or lead type functionality using the offset function, similar to how you would have done it in SQL Server. We're going to take a look at that. I'll explain that here in just a moment, so stay tuned. When I was a consultant here at Pragmatic Works for many years, I wrote a lot of SQL. And my favorite functions to use, for whatever reason, I don't know why, were window functions. I loved window functions. I was introduced to them very early on in my journey with SQL. In fact, I remember, I'm trying to remember her last name right now, but Kathy was one of my mentors here, and she introduced me to the lag and lead function. And what I wanted to do was in the table, inside of my select statement, I wanted to go back and get the prior row and bring back a value from that prior row. And that's not quite as easy as it sounds, especially when you have certain gaps and things like that in your data. So let me explain to you and show you real quick the scenario. If maybe you're like, Mitchell, this is all brand new to me. I've never heard of lag. I've never heard of lead. I've never heard of window functions or offset. What is this about? Let me show you exactly what we're trying to accomplish real quick. So over here on the data view, I have brought in a table that has some pretty interesting data. This is going to have fact, stock, history. It has a history across two different stocks. The first stock that I have a history of is Microsoft, and the other one is the Vanguard Total Index Fund, right? So I have two different stocks that I've brought in. This is a daily snapshot of each of those stocks. What was the open for that day? What was the close? What was the high? What was the low? And what I want to do is I want to do some comparisons, day over day, week over week, those types of things to see growth. Is it trending in certain directions, to do some technical analysis? I have a little bit of history with this with other tools. Now, when I look at this, when I look at the stock right here, if I look at just Microsoft and I have this table, let me make sure, yes, the table is ordered in ascending order. Well, let me filter it down to just Microsoft too so we can look at this. So I've already kind of created the solution here. So this is what I'm going to show you, but I'm sorting it in ascending order. You see the little arrow right here. Now, what I want to do is I want to take the close from this day and I want to compare it to the next day close. In order to do that, the easiest way to do that is to get it on the same row, right? So I have today's close and I want to see the prior day close, and I got it right there. Now I used the window function, I've used the offset function to make this work, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a moment. Where this becomes very problematic to a lot of tools, if you're not using a window function like lag or lead, is when you have these gaps like I have right here. See, the stock market is closed on a lot of days. This is why Kathy Kellenberger many years ago introduced me to the lag function, because I was back then doing some technical analysis of stocks. And I was trying to get day over day comparisons, but sometimes if it was a Monday, I had to go back 3 days. If there was a holiday, I had to go back 4 days. And I was writing a bunch of subqueries. It was a lot of code. It wasn't very well and it wasn't performant. So here we go. We got this. Now, how do I get this value here? Now, are there ways to do this inside of DAX not using window functions? Of course. That's why I haven't done this video sooner, because I've been stuck in the ways that I've always done this without really thinking about it. But I do want to take a look at this, and that's what we're going to do here. So Mitchell, how did you get the previous close? Now you can go back one day, you can go forward one day, you can go back a week, you can go back 7 days, right? You can go back 7 rows if not really 7 days here because it's not based on days, but 7 rows. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to create a new calculated column and I'm going to walk through this because this is actually a little bit tricky to me, and I found a really great blog. There's not a lot of information out there. I'm pretty surprised. But I found a really great blog, actually a series of blogs from one guy or gal, I don't know. And I'm going to put it in the chat. I will put it in the description below. So check out the description. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to call this one my previous close. We'll call this V2. It'll be a new one. Equals. And I'm going to start off with a function called offset. Now, this offset has a lot of different parameters. The first one is the delta. So that's telling me within the table, how many rows back or how many rows forward do you effectively want to go? Well, I'm going to go back 1 row to the prior record, right? So I'm going to do -1. If I wanted to go forward, which in SQL would have been the lead function, right? Going forward, I would say 1, 2, 3. I would put a positive number there. So that's the first thing. The next thing that really threw me off was this relation parameter. I thought that I could just come in here and I could type in fact stock history, which is the name of my table, and it would work. It does not work. It'll actually give me a circular dependency, and the blog that I'll put in the description below will explain that. And I don't quite know if he actually does explain it, but it is a the blog talks about it. The blog talks about it and discusses it. What I'm gonna have to do instead, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to summarize this. So I'm gonna summarize my fact stock history table, and then I'm gonna bring in the 3 columns that I wind up using here. So I wind up using the date, because I'm going to order by date. You'll see that in a moment. I use the stock to do my grouping. When you have multiple different groups, like different stocks or different departments or whatever, you have to do a grouping, right? Just like you would any other time. So I'm going to group by that. And then I'm also going to bring in the close price. So I'm going to put all of the columns that you're going to see me using in the next couple of parameters are here inside of this virtual table. So down below, the next thing is the order by. Now the order by is important, because how does it know to go back to the prior row? Well, I'm going to order the virtual table, right? I'm going to order the result set, and I'm going to say, hey, go back to -1 based on the order criteria. So what I'm going to order by here is going to be fact, and I hate when it does not. Oh, I think you actually have to type in order by, don't you? See, I'm trying to remember. So I'm going to do fact stock history date, like so. And I'm telling it to do that. Now, you could technically come in here and do ascending, descending, but I'm going to do ascending, right? From the very beginning day to the last day. So I'm going to keep that very simple. That's my order by. Now, the next thing that I want to do here is my partition by. This is important because I have multiple different stocks. I have Microsoft, Vanguard, Total Index. In a real scenario here, I would have multiple other stocks that I maybe trade in or invest in or what have you. And so I want to make sure that if I'm looking at Microsoft and I'm looking at June 5th, that I go back to June 4th and get the closing price for Microsoft for the prior row, not for accidentally for some other stock. So I'm going to do that grouping, right? I'm going to do that partition by. I like to think of partition by like a group by. That's a very easy way to think about it. If you've done window functions inside of SQL, this is going to be automatically intuitive to you. If you've never done window functions in SQL, it's important to understand that an easy way to think of this is a group by. And so I'm going to do a partition by. In fact, I don't think I have to type partition by for this scenario. Don't quite remember. Let me try to type it in again. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit enter, let it break. Let's see if I can get my IntelliSense back. And so I don't want to worry about blanks. You can put something in here for blanks, but it'll handle that automatically. That's kind of why it's messing up a little bit, is because there's an optional parameter that I wasn't putting in there. I don't think I have to put anything in, but I'm just going to put default for a moment. And I want to partition by the stock, okay? To show you that, by the way, if I hit comma here, you'll notice that there's blanks. Now, it's surrounded by square brackets, which means it's an optional parameter. I don't actually have to put anything in, but it wasn't, the IntelliSense wasn't picking it up because of that. So I'm going to actually remove that now, you'll see. And it'll give me a red squiggly, but I'm pretty sure it's going to work regardless. So now, here it is. This is one more closing parenthesis. This is it. This is a lag function. This is going to go to the prior day, and it's going to get the whole row. I don't want to return the whole row. I want to return a single value. I want to return the closing price. Maybe you wanted to go back and get the low price or the high of that day, or the open price, whatever. That's up to you. But here we have to do a little bit more. And there's a few different ways you can get the information from this. What I'm going to do is, this is effectively a table expression. That's the way I view it. And a lot of times when I have a table expression, I use an X function on top of it, right? Like min X or max X. Here it doesn't matter. I know, because I know my data. If it's going back one row for Microsoft, it's only one row that is being returned here. So if I were to do count rows on top of this, right? If I were to do count rows, just to count the number of rows that are in this virtual table that gets returned, the result set of that right here should be 1, and it is. So that tells me it's only returning one row. One row is what's being returned. So I just need to return from that row, from the columns, I need to return the one column I care about, which is the close price, right? So I can use min X. I can also use max X, because the minimum of whatever the value is for the prior day if the prior day close price was 274, the minimum of 274 is 274. The maximum of 274 is 274. So it doesn't matter which one I use here, as long as I properly partitioned my data, sorted my data, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to come down here, put a comma, and then I'm going to tell it that I want to return my fact stock history close price. There we go, close parenthesis. And that's it. Now there's a couple different ways. One of the blogs that I found, I think it was from the series, he wrote this a different way than I wrote it. Ended up using like select columns. That's not something I would generally write personally inside of Power BI Desktop, something I've used a lot in DAX Studio. Here I usually would write it this way. That's just the way I do it, but this gets the job done. And so when I hit enter here, we're going to see the value show up right here, which is 275. Now I apparently need to change this to a decimal number, add in a couple of decimals so we can get that exact value from the prior day. All right, there we go, close enough. And now we can see that if I'm looking at this record right here, June 3rd, right? June 3rd, if I'm looking at this record and I want to go back and get the prior day, what I can do is the calculation we just did, which was awesome. And that value right there does reflect the close price from the prior day. That's it. In this video, we took a look at an introduction really to the offset function. If you've ever worked with SQL, a lot of SQL developers want to know, how can I do that type of functionality inside of DAX, inside of Power BI? And this is how you would do that. If you're used to writing, DAX and you never work with SQL, you can do this in an alternate way. I could technically capture in a variable the current date of this row. I could capture the current stock price of this row, both of those in a variable. Then I could say filter down the table to return all the rows from this table where it's equal to that stock price and the date is less than or equal to that date. So that returns all the rows prior to that day. Then I would grab the maximum date from that, and then I could pass that into, there's probably a more efficient way to write the code, but then I could say, all right, return the closing price from this table where the max date equals the date that I just returned plus the stock price. So there's other ways to write the code. Of course, there's multiple ways to get to that result, but I thought this was really cool. And like I said, I've kind of put off myself learning window functions. So I hope this was useful for you. If it was, make sure to take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button so you'll be notified of any of our future videos. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.